The value of Yogananda's autobiography is greatly enhanced by the fact that it is one of the few books in English about the wise men of India which have been written not by a journalist or foreigner, but one of their own race and training. In short, a book about yogis by a yogi. As an eyewitness recountal of the extraordinary lives and powers of modern Hindu saints, the book has importance both timely and timeless. To its illustrious author, whom I have had the pleasure of knowing in both India and America, may every reader render due appreciation and gratitude. His unusual life document is certainly one of the most revealing of the depths of the Hindu mind and heart, and of the spiritual wealth of India, ever to be published in the West. Autobiography of a Yogi, Chapter 1. My Parents and Early Life. The characteristic features of Indian culture have long been a search for ultimate verities and the concomitant disciple-guru relationship. My own path led to a Christ-like sage. His beautiful life was chiseled for the ages. He was one of the great masters who are India's truest wealth. Emerging in every generation, they have bulwarked their land against the fate of ancient Egypt and Babylonia. I find my earliest memories covering the anachronistic features of a previous incarnation. Clear recollections came to me of a distant life, in which I had been a yogi amid the Himalayan snows. These glimpses of the past, by some dimensionless link, also afforded me a glimpse of the future. I still remember the helpless humiliations of infancy. I was resentfully conscious of being unable to walk and to express myself freely. Prayerful surges arose within me as I realized my bodily impotence. My strong emotional life was mentally expressed in words of many languages. Amid the inward confusion of tongues, I gradually became accustomed to hearing the Bengali syllables of my people. The beguiling scope of an infant's mind, adultly considered to be limited to toys and toes. Psychological ferment and my unresponsive body brought me to many obstinate crying spells. I recall the general family bewilderment at my distress. Happier memories, too, crowd in on me. My mother's caresses, and my first attempts at lisping phrase and toddling step. These early triumphs, usually forgotten quickly, are yet a natural basis of self-confidence. My far-reaching memories are not unique. Many yogis are known to have retained their self-consciousness without interruption by the dramatic transition to and from life and death. If man be solely a body, its loss indeed ends his identity. But if prophets down the millenniums spake with truth, man is essentially a soul, incorporeal and omnipresent. Although odd, clear memories of infancy are not extremely rare. During travels in numerous lands, I have heard very early recollections from the lips of veracious men and women. I was born on January the 5th, 1893, in Gorakhpur, in northeastern India, near the Himalaya mountains. There my first 8 years were passed. We were 8 children, 4 boys and 4 girls. I, Mukunda Lal Ghosh, was the second son and the 4th child. Father and mother were Bengalis, of the Kshatriya caste, the second caste, originally that of rulers and warriors. Both were blessed with saintly nature. Their mutual love, tranquil and dignified, never expressed itself frivolously. A perfect parental harmony was the calm center of the revolving tumult of 8 young lives. Father, Bhagabati Charan Ghosh, was kind, grave, at times stern. Loving him dearly, we children yet observed a certain reverential distance. An outstanding mathematician and logician, he was guided principally by his intellect. But mother was a queen of hearts, and taught us only through love. After her death, father displayed more of his inner tenderness. I noticed then that his gaze often seemed to be metamorphosed into my mother's gaze. In mother's presence, we children made an early bittersweet acquaintance with the scriptures. Mother would resourcefully summon from the Mahabharata and the Ramayana suitable tales to meet the exigencies of discipline. On these occasions, chastisement and instruction went hand in hand. As a gesture of respect for father, in the afternoons mother would dress us children carefully to welcome him home from the office. He held a position similar to that of a vice president in one of India's large companies, Bengal Nagpur Railway. His work involved travelling. Our family lived in several cities during my childhood. Mother held an open hand toward the needy. Father was also kindly disposed, but his respect for law and order extended to the budget. One fortnight mother spent in feeding the poor more than father's monthly income. "All I ask, please," father said, "is that you keep your charities within a reasonable limit." Even a gentle rebuke from her husband was grievous to mother. Not hinting to the children at any disagreement, she ordered a hackney carriage. "Goodbye. I'm going away to my mother's home." Ancient ultimatum. We broke into astounded lamentations. Our maternal uncle arrived opportunely. He whispered to father some sage counsel, garnered no doubt from the ages. After father had made a few conciliatory remarks, mother happily dismissed the cab. Thus ended the only trouble I ever noticed between my parents. But I recall a characteristic discussion. "Please give me 10 rupees for a hapless woman who has just arrived at the house." Mother's smile had its own persuasion. "Why 10 rupees? 1 is enough," father added a justification. "When my father and grandparents died suddenly, I had my first experience of poverty. My only breakfast, before walking miles to my school, was a small banana. Later, at the university, I was in such need that I applied to a wealthy judge for aid of 1 rupee per month. He declined, remarking that even a rupee is important." How bitterly you recall the denial of that rupee. Mother's heart had an instant logic. Do you want this woman also to remember painfully your refusal of 10 rupees, which she needs urgently? You win. With the immemorial gesture of vanquished husbands, he opened his wallet. "Here is a 10 rupee note. Give it to her with my goodwill." Father tended first to say no to any new proposal. His attitude towards the stranger who so readily had won mother's sympathy was an example of his customary caution. An aversion to instant acceptance is really only honouring the principle of due reflection. I always found father reasonable and evenly balanced in his judgments. If I could bolster up my numerous requests with 1 or 2 good arguments, he would invariably put within my reach the coveted goal, whether a vacation trip or a new motorcycle. Father was a strict disciplinarian to his children in their early years, but his attitude towards himself was truly Spartan. He never visited the theatre, for instance, but sought his recreation in various spiritual practices and in reading the Bhagavad Gita. Shunning all luxuries, he would cling to 1 old pair of shoes until they were useless. His sons bought automobiles after they came into popular use, but father was content with the trolley car for his daily ride to the office. Father was not interested in the accumulation of money for the sake of power. On one occasion, after he had organized the Calcutta Urban Bank, he refused to benefit himself by holding any of its shares. He had simply wished to perform a civic duty in his spare time. Several years after father had retired on a pension, an accountant from England came to India to examine the books of Bengal Nagpur Railway. The amazed investigator discovered that father had never applied for overdue bonuses. He did the work of 3 men, the accountant told the company. He has rupees 125,000, $41,250, owing to him as back compensation. The treasurer sent father a cheque for that amount. My parent thought so little about the matter that he forgot to mention it to the family. Much later he was questioned by my youngest brother, Vishnu, who had noticed the large deposit on a bank statement. "Why be elated by material profit?" father replied. "The one who pursues a goal of even-mindedness is neither jubilant with gain nor depressed by loss. He knows that man arrives penniless in this world and departs without a single rupee." Early in their married life, my parents became disciples of a great master, Lahiri Mahashai of Benares. This association strengthened father's naturally ascetical temperament. Mother once made a remarkable admission to my eldest sister Roma. "Your father and I sleep together as man and wife only once a year, for the purpose of having children." Father met Lahiri Mahashai through Abhinash Babu, an employee of a branch line of Bengal Nagpur Railway. In Gorakhpur, Abhinash Babu instructed my young ears with engrossing tales of many Indian saints. He invariably concluded with a tribute to the superior glories of his own guru. "Did you ever hear of the extraordinary circumstances under which your father became a disciple of Lahiri Mahashai? It was on a lazy summer afternoon, as Abhinash and I sat together in the compound of my home, that he put this intriguing question." I shook my head with a smile of anticipation. "Years ago, before you were born, I asked my superior officer, your father, to give me a week's leave from my office duties in order to visit my guru in Benares. Your father ridiculed my plan. 'Are you going to become a religious fanatic?' he inquired. 'Concentrate on your office work if you want to forge ahead.' Sadly walking home along a woodland path that day, I met your father in a palanquin. He dismissed his servants and conveyance and fell into step beside me. Seeking to console me, he pointed out the advantages of striving for worldly success. But I heard him listlessly. My heart was repeating, 'Lahiri Mahashai, I cannot live without seeing you.' Our path took us to the edge of a tranquil field, where the rays of the late afternoon sun were crowning the tall ripple of the wild grass. We paused in admiration. There in the field, only a few yards from us, the form of my great guru suddenly appeared. 'Bhagavati, you are too hard on your employee.' His voice was resonant in our astounded ears. He vanished as mysteriously as he had come. On my knees, I was exclaiming, 'Lahiri Mahashaya! Lahiri Mahashaya!' For a few moments your father was motionless with stupefaction. 'Abhinash, not only do I give you leave, but I give myself leave to start for Benares tomorrow. I must know this great Lahiri Mahashai, who is able to materialize himself at will in order to intercede for you. I will take my wife and ask this master to initiate us in his spiritual path. Will you guide us to him?' Of course. Joy filled me at the miraculous answer to my prayer and the quick, favorable turn of events. The next evening, your parents and I entrained for Benares. Reaching there on the following day, we took a horse cart for some distance, then had to walk through narrow lanes to my guru's secluded home. Entering his little parlour, we bowed before the master and locked in his habitual lotus posture. He blinked his piercing eyes and levelled them on your father. 'Bhagavati, you are too hard on your employee.' His words were the same as those he had used 2 days before in the grassy field. He added, 'I am glad that you have permitted Abhinash to visit me, and that you and your wife have accompanied him.' To their joy, he initiated your parents in the spiritual practice of Kriya Yoga. Your father and I, as brother disciples, have been close friends since the memorable day of the vision. Lahiri Mahashai took a definite interest in your own birth. Your life shall surely be linked with his own. The Master's blessing never fails. Lahiri Mahashaya left this world shortly after I had entered it. His picture, in an ornate frame, always graced our family altar in the various cities to which Father was transferred by his office. Many a morning and evening found Mother and me meditating before an improvised shrine, offering flowers dipped in fragrant sandalwood paste. With frankincense and myrrh, as well as our united devotions, we honoured the divinity that had found full expression in Lahiri Mahashaya. His picture had a surpassing influence over my life. As I grew, the thought of the Master grew with me. In meditation, I would often see his photographic image emerge from its small frame and, taking a living form, sit before me. When I attempted to touch the feet of his luminous body, it would change and again become the picture. As childhood slipped into boyhood, I found Lahiri Mahashaya transformed in my mind from a little image cribbed in a frame to a living, enlightening presence. I frequently prayed to him in moments of trial or confusion, finding within me his solacing direction. At first I grieved because he was no longer physically living. As I began to discover his secret omnipresence, I lamented no more. He had often written to those of his disciples who were over-anxious to see him, "Why come to view my flesh and bones, when I am ever within range of your kutastha," spiritual sight? At about the age of 8, I was blessed with a wonderful healing through the photograph of Lahiri Mahashaya. This experience gave intensification to my love. While at our family estate in Ichapur, Bengal, I was stricken with Asiatic cholera. My life was despaired of. The doctors could do nothing. At my bedside, Mother frantically motioned me to look at Lahiri Mahashaya's picture on the wall above my head. Bow to him mentally. She knew I was too feeble even to lift my hands in salutation. If you really show your devotion and inwardly kneel before him, your life will be spared. I gazed at his photograph and saw there a blinding light enveloping my body and the entire room. My nausea and other uncontrollable symptoms disappeared. I was well. At once I felt strong enough to bend over and touch Mother's feet in appreciation of her immeasurable faith in her Guru. Mother pressed her head repeatedly against the little picture. "O omnipresent Master, I thank thee that thy light hath healed my son." I realized that she had witnessed the luminous blaze through which I had instantly recovered from a usually fatal disease. One of my most precious possessions is that same photograph. Given to Father by Lahiri Mahashaya himself, it carries a holy vibration. The picture had a miraculous origin. I heard this story from Father's brother disciple, Kali Kumar Roy. It appears that the Master had an aversion to being photographed. Over his protest, a picture was once taken of him in a group of devotees, including Kali Kumar Roy. It was an amazed photographer who discovered that the plate, which had clear images of all the disciples, revealed nothing more than a blank space in the center where he had reasonably expected to find the outlines of Lahiri Mahashaya. The phenomenon was widely discussed. A student, who was an expert photographer, Ganga Dar Babu, boasted that the fugitive figure would not escape him. The next morning, as the Guru sat in lotus posture on a wooden bench with a screen behind him, Ganga Dar Babu arrived with his equipment. Taking every precaution for success, he greedily exposed 12 plates. On each one he soon found the imprint of the wooden bench and screen, but once again the Master's form was missing. With tears and shattered pride, Ganga Dar Babu sought out his Guru. It was many hours before Lahiri Mahashaya broke his silence with a pregnant comment. "I am spirit. Can your camera reflect the omnipresent invisible?" I see it cannot, but, holy sir, I lovingly desire a picture of your bodily temple. My vision has been narrow. Until today I did not realize that in you the Spirit fully dwells. Come then, tomorrow morning I will pose for you." Again, the photographer focused his camera. This time the sacred figure, not cloaked with mysterious imperceptibility, was sharp on the plate. The master never posed for another picture. At least I have seen none. The photograph is reproduced in this book. Lahiri Mahasya's fair features, of a universal cast, hardly suggest to what race he belonged. The joy of God communion is slightly revealed in his enigmatic smile. His eyes, half open to denote a nominal interest in the outer world, are also half closed, indicating his absorption in inner bliss. Oblivious of the poor lures of the earth, he was fully awake at all times to the spiritual problems of seekers who approached for his bounty. Shortly after my healing through the potency of the Guru's picture, I had an influential spiritual vision. Sitting on my bed one morning, I fell into a deep reverie. What is behind the darkness of closed eyes? This probing thought came powerfully into my mind. An immense flash of light at once manifested to my inner gaze. Divine shapes of saints, sitting in meditation posture in mountain caves, formed like miniature cinema pictures on the large screen of radiance within my forehead. "Who are you?" I spoke aloud. "We are the Himalayan yogis." The celestial response is difficult to describe. My heart was thrilled. "Ah, I long to go to the Himalayas and become like you." The vision vanished, but the silvery beams expanded in ever-widening circles to infinity. What is this wondrous glow? I am Ishwara. I am light. The voice was as murmuring clouds. I want to be one with thee. Out of the slow dwindling of my divine ecstasy, I salvaged a permanent legacy of inspiration to seek God. He is eternal, ever new joy. This memory persisted long after the day of rapture. Another early recollection is outstanding, and literally so, for I bear the scar to this day. My elder sister Uma and I were seated in the early morning under a neem tree in our Gorakhpur compound. She was helping me in my study of a Bengali primer, what time I could spare my gaze from the nearby parrot eating ripe margosa fruit. Uma complained of a boil on her leg and fetched a jar of ointment. I smeared a bit of the salve on my forearm. "Why do you use medicine on a healthy arm?" "Well, sis, I feel I'm going to have a boil tomorrow. I am testing your ointment on the spot where the boil will appear." "You little liar." "Sis, don't call me a liar until you see what happens in the morning." Indignation filled me. Uma, unimpressed, thrice repeated her taunt. An adamant resolution sounded in my voice as I made slow reply. "By the power of will in me, I say that tomorrow I shall have a fairly large boil in this exact place on my arm, and your boil shall swell to twice its present size." Morning found me with a stalwart boil on the indicated spot. The dimensions of Uma's boil had doubled. With a shriek, my sister rushed to mother. "Mukunda has become a necromancer." Gravely, mother instructed me never to use the power of words for doing harm. I have always remembered her counsel and followed it. My boil was surgically treated. A noticeable scar, left by the doctor's incision, is present today. On my right forearm is a constant reminder of the power in man's sheer word. Those simple and apparently harmless phrases to Uma, spoken with deep concentration, had possessed sufficient hidden force to explode like bombs and to produce definite, though injurious, effects. I understood later that the explosive vibratory power in speech could be wisely directed to free one's life from difficulties and thus operate without scar or rebuke. Our family moved to Lahore in the Punjab. There I acquired a picture of the Divine Mother in the form of the goddess Kali, a symbol of God in the aspect of eternal Mother Nature. It sanctified a small informal shrine on the balcony of our home. An unequivocal conviction came over me that fulfillment would crown any of my prayers uttered in that sacred spot. Standing there with Uma one day, I watched two boys flying kites over the roofs of two buildings that were separated from our house by an extremely narrow lane. "Why are you so quiet?" Uma pushed me playfully. "I am just thinking how wonderful it is that Divine Mother gives me whatever I ask." "I suppose she would give you those two kites," my sister laughed derisively. "Why not?" I began silent prayers for their possession. Matches are played in India with kites whose strings are covered with glue and ground glass. Each player attempts to sever the string held by his opponent. A freed kite sails over the roofs. There is great fun in catching it. As Uma and I were on a roofed, recessed balcony, it seemed impossible that a loosed kite could come into our hands. Its string would naturally dangle over the roof. The players across the lane began their match. One string was cut. Immediately the kite floated in my direction. Owing to a sudden abatement of the breeze, the kite remained stationary for a moment, during which its string became firmly entangled with a cactus plant on top of the opposite house. A long, perfect loop was formed for my seizure. I handed the prize to Uma. "It was just an extraordinary accident and not an answer to your prayer. If the other kite comes to you, then I shall believe." Sister's dark eyes conveyed more amazement than her words. I continued my prayers with intensity. A forcible tug by the other player resulted in the abrupt loss of his kite. It headed toward me, dancing in the wind. My helpful assistant, the cactus plant, again secured the kite string in the necessary loop by which I could grasp it. I presented my second trophy to Uma. "Indeed, Divine Mother listens to you. This is all too uncanny for me." Sister bolted away like a frightened fawn. Chapter 2. My Mother's Death and the Mystic Amulet. My mother's greatest desire was the marriage of my elder brother. "Ah, when I behold the face of Ananta's wife, I shall find heaven on this earth." I frequently heard Mother express in these words her strong Indian sentiment for family continuity. I was about 11 years old at the time of Ananta's betrothal. Mother was in Calcutta, joyously supervising the wedding preparations. Father and I alone remained at our home in Bareilly in northern India, whence Father had been transferred after 2 years at Lahore. I had previously witnessed the splendour of nuptial rites for my two elder sisters, Roma and Uma. But for Ananta, as the eldest son, plans were truly elaborate. Mother was welcoming numerous relatives, daily arriving in Calcutta from distant homes. She lodged them comfortably in a large, newly acquired house at 50 Amherst Street. Everything was in readiness. The banquet delicacies, the gay throne on which brother was to be carried to the home of the bride-to-be, the rows of colourful lights, the mammoth cardboard elephants and camels, the English, Scottish and Indian orchestras, the professional entertainers, the priests for the ancient rituals. Father and I, in gala spirits, were planning to join the family in time for the ceremony. Shortly before the great day, however, I had an ominous vision. It was in Bareilly, on a midnight. As I slept beside Father on the piazza of our bungalow, I was awakened by a peculiar flutter of the mosquito netting over the bed. The flimsy curtains parted, and I saw the beloved form of my mother. "Awaken your father." Her voice was only a whisper. "Take the first available train at 4 o'clock this morning. Rush to Calcutta if you would see me." The wraith-like figure vanished. "Father, father, mother is dying." The terror in my tone aroused him instantly. I sobbed out the fatal tidings. "Never mind that hallucination of yours." Father gave his characteristic negation to a new situation. "Your mother is in excellent health. If we get any bad news, we shall leave tomorrow." "You shall never forgive yourself for not starting now." Anguish caused me to add bitterly, "Nor shall I ever forgive you." The melancholy morning came with explicit words. "Mother dangerously ill. Marriage postponed. Come at once." Father and I left distractedly. One of my uncles met us en route at a transfer point. The train thundered towards us, looming with telescopic increase. From my inner tumult, an abrupt determination arose to hurl myself on the railway tracks. Already bereft, I felt, of my mother, I could not endure a world suddenly bare to the bone. I loved mother as my dearest friend on earth. Her solacing black eyes had been my refuge in the trifling tragedies of childhood. Does she yet live? I stopped for one last question to my uncle. He was not slow to interpret the desperation in my face. "Of course she is alive." But I scarcely believed him. When we reached our Calcutta home, it was only to confront the stunning mystery of death. I collapsed into an almost lifeless state. Years passed before any reconciliation entered my heart. Storming the very gates of heaven, my cries at last summoned the Divine Mother. Her words brought final healing to my suppurating wounds. "It is I who have watched over thee, life after life, in the tenderness of many mothers. See in my gaze the two black eyes, the lost beautiful eyes thou seekest." Father and I returned to Bareilly soon after the crematory rites for the well-beloved. Early every morning I made a pathetic memorial pilgrimage to a large shioli tree which shaded the smooth green-gold lawn before our bungalow. In poetical moments I thought that the white shioli flowers were strewing themselves with a willing devotion over the grassy altar. Mingling tears with the dew, I often observed a strange, otherworldly light emerging from the dawn. Intense pangs of longing for God assailed me. I felt powerfully drawn to the Himalayas. One of my cousins, fresh from a period of travel in the holy hills, visited us in Bareilly. I listened eagerly to his tales about the high mountain abode of yogis and swamis. "Let us run away to the Himalayas." My suggestion one day to Dwarka Prasad, the young son of our landlord in Bareilly, fell on unsympathetic ears. He revealed my plan to my elder brother, who had just arrived to see father. Instead of laughing lightly over this impractical scheme of a small boy, Ananta made it a definite point to ridicule me. "Where is your orange robe? You can't be a Swami without that." But I was inexplicably thrilled by his words. They brought me a clear picture, that of myself as a monk, roaming about India. Perhaps they awakened memories of a past life. In any case, I realized with what natural ease I would wear the garb of the anciently founded monastic order. Chatting one morning with Dwarka, I felt a love for God descending with avalanche-like force. My companion was only partly attentive to the ensuing eloquence, but I was wholeheartedly listening to myself. I fled that afternoon towards Naini Tal in the Himalayan foothills. Ananta gave determined chase. I was forced to return, sadly, to Bareilly. The only pilgrimage permitted me was the customary one at dawn to the shioli tree. My heart wept for my two lost mothers, one human, one divine. The rent left in the family fabric by mother's death was irreparable. Father never remarried during his nearly 40 remaining years. Assuming the difficult role of father-mother to his little flock, he grew noticeably more tender, more approachable. With calmness and insight, he solved the various family problems. After office hours, he retired like a hermit to the cell of his room, practicing Kriya Yoga in a sweet serenity. Long after mother's death, I attempted to engage an English nurse to attend to details that would make my parents' life more comfortable, but father shook his head. Service to me ended with your mother. His eyes were remote with a lifelong devotion. I will not accept ministrations from any other woman. 14 months after mother's passing, I learned that she had left me a momentous message. Ananta had been present at her deathbed and had recorded her words. Though she had asked that the disclosure be made to me in 1 year, my brother had delayed. He was soon to leave Bareilly for Calcutta to marry the girl that mother had chosen for him. One evening, he summoned me to his side. Mukunda, I have been reluctant to give you strange tidings. Ananta's tone held a note of resignation. My fear was to inflame your desire to leave home, but in any case you are bristling with divine ardour. When I captured you recently on your way to the Himalayas, I came to a definite resolve. I must not further postpone the fulfilment of my solemn promise. My brother handed me a small box and delivered mother's message. Let these words be my final blessing, my beloved son Mukunda, mother had said. The hour is here when I must relate a number of phenomenal events following your birth. I first knew your destined path when you were but a babe in my arms. I carried you then to the home of my guru in Benares. Almost hidden behind a throng of disciples, I could barely see Lahiri Mahashaya as he sat in deep meditation. While I patted you, I was praying that the great Guru take notice and bestow a blessing. As my silent devotional demand grew in intensity, he opened his eyes and beckoned me to approach. The others made a way for me. I bowed at the sacred feet. Lahiri Mahashaya seated you on his lap, placing his hand on your forehead by way of spiritually baptizing you. Little mother, thy son will be a yogi. As a spiritual engine, he will carry many souls to God's kingdom. My heart leapt with joy to find my secret prayer granted by the omniscient Guru. Shortly before your birth, he had told me you would follow his path. Later, my son, your vision of the great light was known to me and your sister Roma, as from the next room we observed you motionless on the bed. Your little face was illuminated, your voice rang with iron resolve as you spoke of going to the Himalayas in quest of the divine. In these ways, dear son, I came to know that your road lies far from worldly ambitions. The most singular event in my life brought further confirmation, an event which now impels my deathbed message. It was an interview with a sage in the Punjab. While our family was living in Lahore, one morning the servant came into my room. Mistress, a strange sadhu is here. He insists that he see the mother of Mukunda. These simple words struck a profound chord within me. I went at once to greet the visitor. Bowing at his feet, I sensed that before me was a true man of God. Mother, he said, the great masters wish you to know that your stay on earth shall not be long. Your next illness shall prove to be your last. There was a silence, during which I felt no alarm, but only a vibration of great peace. Finally he addressed me again. You are to be the custodian of a certain silver amulet. I will not give it to you today. To demonstrate the truth in my words, the talisman shall materialize in your hand tomorrow, as you meditate. On your deathbed, you must instruct your eldest son, Ananta, to keep the amulet for 1 year and then to hand it over to your second son. Mukunda will understand the meaning of the talisman from the Great Ones. He shall receive it about the time he is ready to renounce all worldly hopes and to start his vital search for God. When he has retained the amulet for some years, and when it has served its purpose, it shall vanish. Even if kept in the most secret spot, it shall return whence it came. I proffered alms to the saint and bowed before him in great reverence. Not taking the offering, he departed with a blessing. The next evening, as I sat with folded hands in meditation, a silver amulet materialized between my palms, even as the sadhu had promised. It made itself known by a cold, smooth touch. I have jealously guarded it for more than 2 years, and now leave it in Ananta's keeping. Do not grieve for me, as I shall have been ushered by my great Guru into the arms of the Infinite. Farewell, my child. The Cosmic Mother will protect you. A blaze of illumination came over me with possession of the amulet. Many dormant memories awakened. The talisman, round and anciently quaint, was covered with Sanskrit characters. I understood that it came from teachers of past lives, who were invisibly guiding my steps. A further significance there was indeed, but one may not fully unveil the heart of an amulet. How the talisman finally vanished amidst deeply unhappy circumstances of my life, and how its loss was a herald of my gain of a guru, may not be told in this chapter. But the small boy, thwarted in his attempts to reach the Himalayas, daily travelled far on the wings of his amulet. Chapter 3. The Saint with 2 Bodies. Father, if I promise to return home without coercion, may I take a sightseeing trip to Benares? My keen love of travel was seldom hindered by father. He permitted me, even as a mere boy, to visit many cities and pilgrimage spots. Usually 1 or more of my friends accompanied me. We would travel comfortably on first-class passes provided by father. His position as a railroad official was fully satisfactory to the nomads in the family. Father promised to give my request due consideration. The next day he summoned me and held out a round-trip pass from Bareilly to Benares, a number of rupee notes, and 2 letters. I have a business matter to propose to a Benares friend, Kedar Nath Babu. Unfortunately, I have lost his address, but I believe you will be able to get this letter to him through our common friend, Swami Paramahansa. The Swami, my brother disciple, has attained an exalted spiritual stature. You will benefit by his company. This second note will serve as your introduction. Father's eyes twinkled as he added, Mind, no more flights from home. I set forth with the zest of my 12 years, though time has never dimmed my delight in new scenes and strange faces. Reaching Benares, I proceeded immediately to the Swami's residence. The front door was open. I made my way to a long hall-like room on the 2nd floor. A rather stout man, wearing only a loincloth, was seated in lotus posture on a slightly raised platform. His head and unwrinkled face were clean-shaven. A beatific smile played about his lips. To dispel my thought that I had intruded, he greeted me as an old friend. Baba Anand, bliss to my dear one. His welcome was given heartily in a childlike voice. I knelt and touched his feet. Are you Swami Pranabananda? He nodded. Are you Bhagavati's son? His words were out before I had time to get father's letter from my pocket. In astonishment, I handed him the note of introduction, which now seemed superfluous. "Of course, I will locate Kedarnath Babu for you." The saint again surprised me by his clairvoyance. He glanced at the letter and made a few affectionate references to my parent. "You know, I am enjoying 2 pensions. One is by the recommendation of your father, for whom I once worked in the railway office. The other is by the recommendation of my heavenly Father, for whom I have conscientiously finished my earthly duties in life." I found this remark very obscure. "What kind of pension, sir, do you receive from the heavenly Father? Does he drop money in your lap?" He laughed. "I mean a pension of fathomless peace, a reward for many years of deep meditation. I never crave money now. My few material needs are amply provided for. Later you will understand the significance of a second pension." Abruptly terminating our conversation, the saint became gravely motionless. A sphinx-like air enveloped him. At first his eyes sparkled, as if observing something of interest, then grew dull. I felt abashed at his poor soliloquy. He had not yet told me how I might meet father's friend. A trifle restlessly, I looked about me in the bare room, empty except for us 2. My idle gaze took in his wooden sandals, lying under the platform seat. "Little sir, don't get worried. The man you wish to see will be with you in half an hour." The yogi was reading my mind, a feat not too difficult at the moment. Again, he fell into inscrutable silence. When my watch informed me that 30 minutes had elapsed, the Swami aroused himself. "I think Kedarnath Babu is nearing the door," he said. I heard somebody coming up the stairs. An amazed incomprehension arose suddenly. My thoughts raced in confusion. How is it possible that father's friend has been summoned to this place without the help of the messenger? The Swami has spoken to no one but me since my arrival. I unceremoniously quitted the room and descended the steps. Halfway down, I met a thin, fair-skinned man of medium height. He appeared to be in a hurry. "Are you Kedarnath Babu?" Excitement colored my voice. "Yes." "Are you not Bhagavati's son, who has been waiting here to meet me?" He smiled in friendly fashion. "Sir, how do you happen to come here?" I felt baffled resentment over his inexplicable presence. Everything is mysterious today. Less than an hour ago, I had just finished my bath in the Ganges when Swami Paramahansa approached me. I have no idea how he knew I was there at that time. "Bhagavati's son is waiting for you in my apartment," he said. "Will you come with me?" I gladly agreed. As we proceeded hand in hand, the Swami in his wooden sandals was strangely able to outpace me, though I wore these stout walking shoes. "How long will it take you to reach my place?" Paramahansa suddenly halted to ask me this question. "About half an hour. I have something else to do at present." He gave me an enigmatical glance. "I must leave you behind. You can join me in my house, where Bhagavati's son and I will be awaiting you." Before I could remonstrate, he dashed swiftly past me and disappeared in the crowd. I walked here as fast as possible. This explanation only increased my bewilderment. I inquired how long he had known the Swami. "We met a few times last year, but not recently. I was very glad to see him again today, at the bathing ghats." I cannot believe my ears. Am I losing my mind? "Did you meet him in a vision, or did you actually see him, touch his hand and hear the sound of his feet?" "I don't know what you're driving at." He flushed angrily. "I'm not lying to you. Can't you understand that only through the Swami could I have known you were waiting at this place for me? Why, that man, Swami Paramahansa, has not left my sight a moment since I first came about an hour ago." I blurted out the whole story and repeated the conversations the Swami and I had had. His eyes opened wide. Are we living in this material age, or are we dreaming? I never expected to witness such a miracle in my life. I thought this Swami was just an ordinary man, and now I find he can materialize an extra body and work through it. Together we entered the saint's room. Kedarnath Babu pointed to the shoes under the platform seat. "Look, those are the very sandals he was wearing at the ghat," he whispered. "He was clad only in a loincloth, just as I see him now." As the visitor bowed before him, the saint turned to me with a quizzical smile. "Why are you stupefied at all this? The subtle unity of the phenomenal world is not hidden from true yogis. I instantly see and converse with my disciples in distant Calcutta. They can similarly transcend at will every obstacle of gross matter." It was probably in an effort to stir spiritual ardour in my young breast that the Swami had condescended to tell me of his powers of astral radio and television. But instead of enthusiasm, I experienced only an awe-stricken fear. Inasmuch as I was destined to undertake my divine search through one particular guru, Sri Yukteswar, whom I had not yet met, I felt no inclination to accept Pranabananda as my teacher. I glanced at him doubtfully, wondering if it were he or his counterpart before me. The master sought to banish my disquiet by bestowing a soul-awakening gaze and by some inspiring words about his guru. Lahiri Mahasaya was the greatest yogi I ever knew. He was divinity itself in the form of flesh. If a disciple, I reflected, could materialize an extra fleshly form at will, what miracles indeed could be barred to his master? I will tell you how priceless is a guru's help. I used to meditate with another disciple for 8 hours every night. We had to work at the railway office during the day. Finding difficulty in carrying on my clerical duties, I desired to devote my whole time to God. For 8 years I persevered, meditating half the night. I had wonderful results. Tremendous spiritual perceptions illuminated my mind. But a little veil always remained between me and the infinite. Even with superhuman earnestness, I found the final irrevocable union to be denied me. One evening I paid a visit to Lahiri Mahasaya and pleaded for his divine intercession. My importunities continued during the entire night. Angelic Guru, my spiritual anguish is such that I can no longer bear my life without meeting the great beloved face to face. What can I do? You must meditate more profoundly. I am appealing to thee, O God, my Master. I see thee materialized before me in a physical body. Bless me that I may perceive thee in thine infinite form. Lahiri Mahasaya extended his hand in a benign gesture. You may go now and meditate. I have interceded for you with Brahma. Immeasurably uplifted, I returned to my home. In meditation that night, the burning goal of my life was achieved. Now I ceaselessly enjoy the spiritual pension. Never from that day has the blissful Creator remained hidden from my eyes behind any screen of delusion. Pranabananda's face was suffused with divine light. The peace of another world entered my heart. All fear had fled. The saint made a further confidence. Some months later I returned to Lahiri Mahasaya and tried to thank him for his bestowal of the infinite gift. Then I mentioned another matter. Divine Guru, I can no longer work in the office. Please release me. Brahma keeps me continuously intoxicated. Apply for a pension from your company. What reason shall I give, so early in my service? Say what you feel. The next day I made my application. The doctor inquired the grounds for my premature request. At work, I find an overpowering sensation rising in my spine. It permeates my whole body, unfitting me for the performance of my duties. Without further questioning, the physician recommended me highly for a pension, which I soon received. I know the divine will of Lahiri Mahasaya worked through the doctor and the railroad officials, including your father. Automatically, they obeyed the great Guru's spiritual direction and freed me for a life of unbroken communion with the Beloved. After this extraordinary revelation, Swami Pranabananda retired into one of his long silences. As I was taking leave, touching his feet reverently, he gave me his blessing. Your life belongs to the path of renunciation and yoga. I shall see you again with your father later on. The years brought fulfillment to both these predictions. Kedarnath Babu walked by my side in the gathering darkness. I delivered father's letter, which my companion read under a street lamp. Your father suggests that I take a position in the Calcutta office of his railway company. How pleasant to look forward to one at least of the pensions that Swami Pranabananda enjoys. But it is impossible. I cannot leave Benares. Alas, 2 bodies are not yet for me. Chapter 4. My interrupted flight toward the Himalayas. Leave your classroom on some trifling pretext and engage a hackney carriage. Stop in the lane where no one in my house can see you. These were my final instructions to Amar Mitra, a high school friend who planned to accompany me to the Himalayas. We had chosen the following day for our flight. Precautions were necessary as my brother Ananta exercised a vigilant eye. He was determined to foil the plans of escape that he suspected were uppermost in my mind. The amulet, like a spiritual yeast, was silently at work within me. I hoped to find amid the Himalayan snows the master whose face often appeared to me in visions. The family was living now in Calcutta, where father had been permanently transferred. Following the patriarchal Indian custom, Ananta had brought his bride to live in our home. There, in a small attic room, I engaged in daily meditations and prepared my mind for the divine search. The memorable morning arrived, with inauspicious rain. Hearing the wheels of Amar's carriage on the road, I hastily tied together a blanket, a pair of sandals, 2 loincloths, a string of prayer beads, Lahiri Mahasaya's picture, and a copy of the Bhagavad Gita. This bundle I threw from my 3rd-story window. I ran down the steps and past my uncle, buying fish at the door. What is the excitement? His gaze roved suspiciously over my person. I gave him a noncommittal smile and walked to the lane. Retrieving my bundle, I joined Amar with conspiratorial caution. We drove to Chandi Chowk, a merchandise centre. For months we had been saving our tiffin money to buy English clothes. Knowing that my clever brother could easily play the part of a detective, we thought to outwit him by wearing European garb. On the way to the station, we stopped for my cousin, Jotin Ghosh, whom I called Jatinda. He was a new convert, longing for a guru in the Himalayas. He donned the new suit we had in readiness, well camouflaged, we hoped. A deep elation possessed our hearts. All we need now are canvas shoes. I led my companions to a shop displaying rubber-soled footwear. Articles of leather, got only through the slaughter of animals, should be absent on this holy trip. I halted on the street to remove the leather cover from my Bhagavad Gita and the leather straps from my English-made solar topi helmet. At the station, we bought tickets to Burdwan, where we planned to transfer for Hardwar in the Himalayan foothills. As soon as the train, like ourselves, was in flight, I gave utterance to a few of my glorious anticipations. "Just imagine," I ejaculated, "we shall be initiated by the masters and experience the trance of cosmic consciousness. Our flesh will be charged with such magnetism that wild animals of the Himalayas will come tamely near us. Tigers will be no more than meek house cats awaiting our caresses." This remark, picturing a prospect I considered entrancing, both metaphorically and literally, brought an enthusiastic smile from Amar. But Jatinder averted his gaze, directing it through the window at the scampering landscape. "Let the money be divided in 3 portions," Jatinder broke a long silence with this suggestion. "Each of us should buy his own ticket at Burdwan. Thus, no one at the station will surmise that we are running away together." I unsuspectingly agreed. At dusk, our train stopped at Burdwan. Jatinder entered the ticket office. Amar and I sat on the platform. We waited 15 minutes, then made unavailing inquiries. Searching in all directions, we shouted Jatinder's name with the urgency of fright, but he'd faded into the dark unknown surrounding the little station. I was completely unnerved, shocked to a peculiar numbness, that God would countenance this depressing episode. The romantic occasion of my first carefully planned flight after him was cruelly marred. "Amar, we must return home." I was weeping like a child. "Jatinder's callous departure is an ill omen. This trip is doomed to failure." "Is this your love for the Lord? Can't you stand the little test of a treacherous companion?" Through Amar's suggestion of a divine test, my heart steadied itself. We refreshed ourselves with famous Burdwan sweetmeats, sit abhog, food for the goddess, and motichur, nuggets of sweet pearl. In a few hours we entrained for Hardwar via Bareilly. Changing trains the following day at Mughal Sarai, we discussed a vital matter as we waited on the platform. "Amar, we may soon be closely questioned by railroad officials. I am not underrating my brother's ingenuity. No matter what the outcome, I will not speak untruth." "All I ask of you, Mukunda, is to keep still. Don't laugh or grin while I'm talking." At this moment a European station agent accosted me. He waved a telegram whose import I immediately grasped. "Are you running away from home in anger?" "No." I was glad his choice of words permitted me to make emphatic reply. Not anger, but divinest melancholy was responsible, I knew, for my unconventional behavior. The official then turned to Amar. The duel of wits that followed hardly permitted me to maintain the counselled stoic gravity. "Where is the 3rd boy?" The man injected a full ring of authority into his voice. "Come now, speak the truth." "Sir, I notice you are wearing eyeglasses. Can't you see that we are only 2? Amar smiled impudently. "I'm not a magician. I can't conjure up a 3rd boy." The official, noticeably disconcerted by this impertinence, sought a new field of attack. "What is your name?" "I am called Thomas. I am the son of an English mother and a converted Christian Indian father." "What is your friend's name?" "I call him Thompson." By this time my inward mirth had reached a zenith. I unceremoniously made for the train, which was providentially whistling for departure. Amar followed with the official, who was credulous and obliging enough to put us into a European compartment. It evidently pained him to think of 2 half-English boys travelling in the section allotted to natives. After his polite exit, I lay back on the seat and laughed uproariously. Amar wore an expression of blithe satisfaction at having outwitted a veteran European official. On the platform, I had contrived to read the telegram. From my brother Ananta it went thus: 3 Bengali boys in English clothes running away from home towards Hardwar via Mughal Sarai. Please detain them until my arrival. Ample reward for your services. Amar, I told you not to leave marked timetables in your home. My glance was reproachful. Brother must have found one there." My friend sheepishly acknowledged the thrust. We halted briefly in Bareilly, where Dwarka Prasad awaited us with a telegram from Ananta. Dwarka tried valiantly to detain us. I convinced him that our flight had not been undertaken lightly. As on a previous occasion, Dwarka refused my invitation to set out for the Himalayas. While our train stood in the station that night, and I was half asleep, Amar was awakened by another questioning official. He too fell a victim to the hybrid charms of Thomas and Thompson. The train bore us triumphantly into a dawn arrival at Hardwar. The majestic mountains loomed invitingly in the distance. We dashed through the station and entered the freedom of city crowds. Our first act was to change into native costume, as Ananta had somehow penetrated our European disguise. A premonition of capture weighed on my mind. Deeming it advisable to leave Hardwar at once, we bought tickets to proceed north to Rishikesh, a soil long hallowed by the feet of many masters. I had already boarded the train, while Amar lagged on the platform. He was brought to an abrupt halt by a shout from a policeman. An unwelcome guardian, the officer escorted Amar and me to a police station bungalow and took charge of our money. He explained courteously that it was his duty to hold us until my elder brother arrived. Learning that the truant's destination had been the Himalayas, the officer related a strange story. "I see you are crazy about saints. You will never meet a greater man of God than the one I saw only yesterday. My brother officer and I first encountered him 5 days ago. We were patrolling by the Ganges, on a sharp lookout for a certain murderer. Our instructions were to capture him, dead or alive. He was known to be masquerading as a sadhu in order to rob pilgrims. A short way before us, we spied a figure which resembled the description of the criminal. He ignored our command to stop. We ran to overpower him. Approaching his back, I wielded my axe with tremendous force. The man's right arm was severed almost completely from his body. Without outcry or glance at the ghastly wound, the stranger astonishingly continued his swift pace. As we jumped in front of him, he spoke quietly. "I am not the murderer you are seeking." I was deeply mortified to see that I had injured the person of a divine-looking sage. Prostrating myself at his feet, I implored his pardon and offered my turban cloth to staunch the heavy spurts of blood. "Son, that was just an understandable mistake on your part." The saint regarded me kindly. "Run along, and don't reproach yourself. The beloved mother is taking care of me." He pushed his dangling arm into its stump, and lo, it adhered. The blood inexplicably ceased to flow. "Come to me under yonder tree in 3 days, and you will find me fully healed. Thus you will feel no remorse." Yesterday my brother officer and I went eagerly to the designated spot. The sadhu was there and allowed us to examine his arm. It bore no scar nor trace of hurt. "I am going via Rishikesh to the Himalayan solitudes." The sadhu blessed us as he departed quickly. I feel that my life has been uplifted through his sanctity. The officer concluded with a pious ejaculation. His experience had obviously moved him beyond his usual depths. With an impressive gesture, he handed me a printed clipping about the miracle. In the usual garbled manner of the sensational type of newspaper, not missing alas even in India, the reporter's version was slightly exaggerated. It indicated that the sadhu had been almost decapitated. Amar and I lamented that we had missed the great yogi who could forgive his persecutor in such a Christ-like way. India, materially poor for the last 2 centuries, yet has an inexhaustible fund of divine wealth. Spiritual skyscrapers may occasionally be encountered by the wayside, even by worldly men like this policeman. We thanked the officer for relieving our tedium with his marvellous story. He was probably intimating that he was more fortunate than we. He had met an illuminated saint without effort. Our earnest search had ended, not at the feet of a master, but in a coarse police station. So near the Himalayas, and yet in our captivity so far, I told Amar I felt doubly impelled to seek freedom. Let us slip away when opportunity offers. We can go on foot to holy Rishikesh, I smiled encouragingly. But my companion had turned pessimist as soon as the stalwart prop of our money had been taken from us. If we started a trek over such dangerous jungle land, we should finish not in the city of saints, but in the stomachs of tigers. Ananta and Amar's brother arrived after 3 days. Amar greeted his relative with affectionate relief. I was unreconciled. Ananta got no more from me than a severe upbraiding. I understand how you feel, my brother spoke soothingly. All I ask of you is to accompany me to Banaras to meet a certain sage and go on to Calcutta to visit our grieving father for a few days. Then you may resume your search here for a master. Amar entered the conversation at this point to disclaim any intention of returning to Hardwar with me. He was enjoying the familial warmth, but I knew I would never abandon the quest for my guru. Our party entrained for Banaras. There I had a singular and instant response to a prayer. A clever scheme had been prearranged by Ananta. Before seeing me in Hardwar, he had stopped in Banaras to ask a scriptural authority to interview me later. The Pandit and his son also had promised Ananta that they would attempt to dissuade me from becoming a sannyasi. Ananta took me to their home. The son, a young man of ebullient manner, greeted me in the courtyard. He engaged me in a lengthy philosophical discourse. Professing to have a clairvoyant knowledge of my future, he discountenanced my idea of being a monk. You will meet continual misfortune and be unable to find God if you insist on deserting your ordinary responsibilities. You cannot work out your past karma without worldly experiences. Immortal words from the Bhagavad Gita rose to my lips in reply. Even he, with the worst of karma, who ceaselessly meditates on me, quickly loses the effects of his past bad actions. Becoming a high-souled being, he soon attains perennial peace. Know this for certain, the devotee who puts his trust in me never perishes. But the forceful prognostications of the young man had slightly shaken my confidence. With all the fervour of my heart, I prayed silently to God, please solve my bewilderment and answer me right here and now, if thou dost desire me to lead the life of a renunciant or a worldly man. I noticed a sadhu of noble countenance standing just outside the compound of the Pandit's house. Evidently, he'd overheard the spirited conversation between the self-styled clairvoyant and me, for the stranger called me to his side. I felt a tremendous power flowing from his calm eyes. Son, don't listen to that ignoramus. In response to your prayer, the Lord tells me to assure you that your sole path in this life is that of the renunciant. With astonishment as well as gratitude, I smiled happily at this decisive message. Come away from that man, the ignoramus was calling me from the courtyard. My saintly guide raised his hand in blessing and slowly departed. That sadhu is just as crazy as you are. It was the hoary-headed Pandit who made this charming observation. He and his son were gazing at me lugubriously. I have heard that he too has left his home in a vague search for God. I turned away. To Ananta I remarked that I would not engage in further discussion with our hosts. My discouraged brother agreed to an immediate departure. We soon entrained for Calcutta. Mr. Detective, how did you discover that I had fled with 2 companions? I vented my lively curiosity to Ananta during our homeward journey. He smiled mischievously. At your school, I found that Amar had left his classroom and had not returned. I went to his home the next morning and unearthed a marked timetable. Amar's father was just leaving by carriage and was talking to the coachman. "My son will not ride with me to his school this morning. He's disappeared," the father moaned. "I heard from a brother coachman that your son and 2 others dressed in European suits boarded the train at Howrah station," the man stated. "They made a present of their leather shoes to the cab driver." Thus I had 3 clues: the timetable, the trio of boys, and the English clothing. I was listening to Ananta's disclosures with mingled mirth and vexation. Our generosity to the coachman had been slightly misplaced. Of course, I rushed to send telegrams to station officials in all the cities that Amar had underlined in the timetable. He had checked Bareilly, so I wired your friend Dwarka there. After inquiries in our Calcutta neighbourhood, I learned that cousin Jatinder had been absent one night, but had arrived home the following morning in European garb. I sought him out and invited him to dinner. He accepted, quite disarmed by my friendly manner. On the way, I led him unsuspectingly to a police station. He was surrounded by several officers whom I had previously selected for their ferocious appearance. Under their formidable gaze, Jatinder agreed to account for his mysterious conduct. "I started for the Himalayas in a buoyant spiritual mood," he explained. "Inspiration filled me at the prospect of meeting the masters, but as soon as Mukunda said, 'During our ecstasies in the Himalayan caves, tigers will be spellbound and sit around us like tame pussies,' my spirits froze. Beads of perspiration formed on my brow. What then, I thought, if the vicious nature of the tigers be not changed through the power of our spiritual trance? Shall they treat us with the kindness of house cats? In my mind's eye, I already saw myself the compulsory inmate of some tiger's stomach, entering there not at once with the whole body, but by installments of its several parts." My anger at Jatinder's vanishment evaporated in laughter. The hilarious explanation on the train was worth all the anguish he had caused me. I must confess to a slight feeling of satisfaction. Jatinder, too, had not escaped an encounter with the police. "Ananta, you're a born sleuth-hound." My glance of amusement was not without some exasperation. "And I shall tell Jatinder I am glad he was prompted by no mood of treachery, as it appeared, but only by the prudent instincts of self-preservation." At home, in Calcutta, Father touchingly requested me to curb my roving feet until at least the completion of my high school studies. In my absence, he had lovingly hatched a plot by arranging for a saintly pundit, Swami Kebalananda, to come regularly to the house. "The sage will be your Sanskrit tutor," my parent announced confidently. Father hoped to satisfy my religious yearnings by instruction from a learned philosopher. But the tables were subtly turned. My new teacher, far from offering intellectual aridities, fanned the embers of my God aspiration. Unknown to Father, Swami Kebalananda was an exalted disciple of Lahiri Mahashai. The peerless Guru had possessed thousands of disciples, silently drawn to him by the irresistibility of his divine magnetism. I learned later that Lahiri Mahashai had often characterized Kebalananda as rishi, or illuminated sage. Luxuriant curls framed my tutor's handsome face. His dark eyes were guileless with the transparency of a child's. All the movements of his slight body were marked by a restful deliberation. Ever gentle and loving, he was firmly established in the infinite consciousness. Many of our happy hours together were spent in deep Kriya meditation. Kebalananda was a noted authority on the ancient Shastras, or sacred books. His erudition had earned him the title of Shastri Mahashai. by which he was usually addressed, but my progress in Sanskrit scholarship was unnoteworthy. I sought every opportunity to forsake prosaic grammar and to talk of yoga and Lahiri Mahashai. My tutor obliged me one day by telling me something of his own life with the master. Rarely fortunate, I was able to remain near Lahiri Mahashai for 10 years. His Banaras home was my nightly goal of pilgrimage. The Guru was always present in a small front parlour on the first floor. As he sat in lotus posture on a backless wooden seat, his disciples garlanded him in a semicircle. His eyes sparkled and danced with the joy of the divine. They were ever half closed, peering through the inner telescopic orb into a sphere of eternal bliss. He seldom spoke at length. Occasionally his gaze would focus on a student in need of help. Healing words poured then like an avalanche of light. An indescribable peace blossomed within me at the master's glance. I was permeated with his fragrance, as though from a lotus of infinity. To be with him, even without exchanging a word for days, was experience which changed my entire being. If any invisible barrier rose in the path of my concentration, I would meditate at the Guru's feet. There, the most tenuous states came easily within my grasp. Such perceptions eluded me in the presence of lesser teachers. The Master was a living temple of God, whose secret doors were open to all disciples through devotion. Lahiri Mahashai was no bookish interpreter of the scriptures. Effortlessly he dipped into the divine library. Foam of words and spray of thoughts gushed from the fountain of his omniscience. He had the wondrous clavis that unlocked the profound philosophical science hidden ages ago in the Vedas. If asked to explain the different planes of consciousness mentioned in the ancient texts, he would smilingly assent. I will undergo those states and presently tell you what I perceive. He was thus diametrically unlike the teachers who commit scripture to memory and then give forth unrealized abstractions. Please expound the holy stanzas as the meaning occurs to you. The taciturn Guru often gave this instruction to a nearby disciple. I will guide your thoughts, that the right interpretation be uttered. In this way, many of Lahiri Mahashai's perceptions came to be recorded with voluminous commentaries by various students. The Master never counselled slavish belief. Words are only shells, he said. Win conviction of God's presence through your own joyous contact in meditation. No matter what the disciple's problem, the Guru advised Kriya Yoga for its solution. The yogic key will not lose its efficiency when I am no longer present in the body to guide you. This technique cannot be bound, filed, and forgotten in the manner of theoretical inspirations. Continue ceaselessly on your path to liberation through Kriya, whose power lies in practice. I myself consider Kriya the most effective device of salvation through self-effort ever to be evolved in man's search for the infinite. Kabbalananda concluded with this earnest testimony. Through its use, the omnipotent God hidden in all men became visibly incarnated in the flesh of Lahiri Mahashai and of a number of his disciples. A Christ-like miracle by Lahiri Mahashai took place in Kabbalananda's presence. My saintly tutor recounted the story one day, his eyes remote from the Sanskrit texts on the table before us. A blind disciple, Ramu, aroused my active pity. Should he have no light in his eyes when he faithfully served our Master, in whom the divine was fully blazing? One morning I sought to speak to Ramu, but he sat for patient hours fanning the Guru with a handmade palm leaf punkah. When the devotee finally left the room, I followed him. Ramu, how long have you been blind? From my birth, sir. Never have my eyes been blessed with a glimpse of the sun. Our omnipotent Guru can help you. Please make a supplication." The following day, Ramu diffidently approached Lahiri Mahashai. The disciple felt almost ashamed to ask that physical wealth be added to his spiritual superabundance. "Master, the illuminator of the cosmos is in you. I pray you to bring his light into my eyes, that I perceive the sun's lesser glow." "Ramu, someone has connived to put me in a difficult position. I have no healing power." "Sir, the Infinite One within you can certainly heal." "That is indeed different, Ramu. God's limit is nowhere. He who ignites the stars and the cells of flesh with mysterious life effulgence can surely bring the lustre of vision into your eyes." The master touched Ramu's forehead at the point between the eyebrows. "Keep your mind concentrated there, and frequently chant the name of the Prophet Rama for 7 days. The splendor of the sun shall have a special dawn for you." Lo, in 1 week it was so. For the first time, Ramu beheld the fair face of nature. The Omniscient One had unerringly directed his disciple to repeat the name of Rama, adorned by him above all other saints. Ramu's faith was the devotionally ploughed soil in which the Guru's powerful seed of permanent healing sprouted. Kebalananda was silent for a moment, then paid a further tribute to his Guru. It was evident in all miracles performed by Lahiri Mahashai that he never allowed the ego principle to consider itself a causative force. By the perfection of his surrender to the prime healing power, the Master enabled it to flow freely through him. The numerous bodies that were spectacularly healed through Lahiri Mahashai eventually had to feed the flames of cremation, but the silent spiritual awakenings he effected, the Christ-like disciples he fashioned, are his imperishable miracles. I never became a Sanskrit scholar. Kebalananda taught me a diviner syntax. Chapter 5. A Perfume Saint Displays His Wonders. To everything there is a season, and a time to every purpose under the heaven. I did not have this wisdom of Solomon to comfort me. I gazed searchingly about me on any excursion from home for the face of my destined Guru, but my path did not cross his until after the completion of my high school studies. 2 years elapsed between my flight with Amar towards the Himalayas and the great day of Sri Yukteswar's arrival into my life. During that interim, I met a number of sages: the Perfume Saint, the Tiger Swami, Nagendranath Baduri, Master Mahashai, and the famous Bengali scientist Jagadish Chandra Bose. My encounter with the Perfume Saint had 2 preambles, one harmonious and the other humorous. God is simple, everything else is complex. Do not seek absolute values in the relative world of nature. These philosophical finalities gently entered my ear as I stood silently before a temple image of Kali. Turning, I confronted a tall man whose garb, or lack of it, revealed him a wandering sadhu. "You have indeed penetrated the bewilderment of my thoughts," I smiled gratefully. "The confusion of benign and terrible aspects in nature, as symbolized by Kali, has puzzled wiser heads than mine. Few there be who solve her mystery. Good and evil is the challenging riddle which life places sphinx-like before every intelligence. Attempting no solution, most men pay forfeit with their lives, penalty now even as in the days of Thebes. Here and there, a towering lonely figure never cries defeat. From the maya of duality, he plucks the cleaveless truth of unity. You speak with conviction, sir. I have long exercised an honest introspection, the exquisitely painful approach to wisdom. Self-scrutiny, relentless observance of one's thoughts, is a stark and shattering experience. It pulverizes the stoutest ego, but true self-analysis mathematically operates to produce seers. The way of self-expression, individual acknowledgements, results in egotists, sure of the right to their private interpretation of God and the universe. Truth humbly retires, no doubt, before such arrogant originality. I was enjoying the discussion. Man can understand no eternal verity until he has freed himself from pretensions. The human mind, bared to a centuried slime, is teeming with the repulsive life of countless world delusions. Struggles of the battlefield pale into insignificance here, when man first contends with inner enemies. No mortal foes these, to be overcome by a harrowing array of might. Omnipresent, unresting, pursuing man even in sleep, subtly equipped with miasmic weapons, these soldiers of ignorant lusts seek to slay us all. Thoughtless is the man who buries his ideals, surrendering to the common fate. May he seem other than impotent, wooden, ignominious? Respected sir, have you no sympathy for the bewildered masses? The sage was silent for a moment, then answered obliquely, To love both the invisible God, repository of all virtues, and visible man, apparently possessed of none, is often baffling, but ingenuity is equal to the maze. Inner research soon exposes a unity of all human minds, the stalwart kinship of selfish motive. In one sense at least, the brotherhood of man stands revealed. An aghast humility follows this levelling discovery. It ripens into compassion for one's fellows, blind to the healing potencies of the soul awaiting exploration. The saints of every age, sir, have felt like yourself for the sorrows of the world. Only the shallow man loses responsiveness to the woes of others' lives, as he sinks into narrow suffering of his own. The sadhu's austere face was noticeably softened. The one who practices a scalpel self-dissection will know an expansion of universal pity. Release is given him from the deafening demands of his ego. The love of God flowers on such soil. The creature finally turns to his Creator, if for no other reason than to ask in anguish, Why, Lord, why? By ignoble whips of pain, man is driven at last into the infinite presence, whose beauty alone should lure him. The sage and I were present in the Calcutta Kaligat temple, whither I had gone to view its famed magnificence. With a sweeping gesture, my chance companion dismissed the ornate dignity. Bricks and mortar sing us no audible tune. The heart opens only to the human chant of being. We strolled to the inviting sunshine at the entrance, where throngs of devotees were passing to and fro. You are young, the sage surveyed me thoughtfully. India, too, is young. The ancient rishis laid down ineradicable patterns of spiritual living. Their hoary dictums suffice for this day and land, not outmoded, not unsophisticated against the guiles of materialism. The disciplinary precepts mould India still. By millenniums, more than embarrassed scholars care to compute, the skeptic time has validated Vedic worth. Take it for your heritage. As I was reverently bidding farewell to the eloquent sadhu, he revealed a clairvoyant perception. After you leave here today, an unusual experience will come your way. I quitted the temple precincts, and wandered along aimlessly. Turning a corner, I ran into an old acquaintance, one of those fellows whose conversational powers ignore time and embrace eternity. "I shall let you go in a very short while," he promised, "if you will tell me all that has happened during the years of our separation." What a paradox! I must leave you now. But he held me by the hand, forcing out tidbits of information. He was like a ravenous wolf, I thought in amusement. The longer I spoke, the more hungrily he sniffed for news. Inwardly, I petitioned the goddess Kali to devise a graceful means of escape. My companion left me abruptly. I sighed with relief and doubled my pace, dreading any relapse into the garrulous fever. Hearing rapid footsteps behind me, I quickened my speed. I dared not look back, but with a bound the youth rejoined me, jovially clasping my shoulder. "I forgot to tell you of Ganda Baba, perfume saint, who is gracing yonder house." He pointed to a dwelling a few yards distant. "Do meet him. He's interesting. You may have an unusual experience. Goodbye." And he actually left me. The similarly worded prediction of the sadhu at Kalighat temple flashed through my mind. Intrigued, I entered the house and was ushered into a commodious parlour. A crowd of people were sitting, orient-wise, here and there on a thick orange-coloured carpet. An awed whisper reached my ear. "Behold, Ganda Baba, on the leopard skin. He can give the natural perfume of any flower to a scentless one, or revive a wilted blossom, or make a person's skin exude delightful fragrance." I looked directly at the saint. His quick gaze rested on mine. He was plump and bearded, with dark skin and large gleaming eyes. "Son, I am glad to see you. Say what you want. Would you like some perfume?" "What for?" I thought his remark rather childish. "To experience the miraculous way of enjoying perfumes." Harnessing God to make odours? What of it? God makes perfumes anyway. Yes, but he fashions frail bottles of petals for fresh use and discard. Can you materialize flowers? Yes, but usually I produce perfumes, little friend. Then scent factories will go out of business. I will permit them to keep their trade. My own purpose is to demonstrate the power of God. Sir, is it necessary to prove God? Isn't he performing miracles in everything, everywhere? Yes, but we too should manifest some of his infinite creative variety. How long did it take you to master your art? 12 years. For manufacturing scents by astral means, it seems, my honoured saint, you've been wasting a dozen years for fragrances which you can obtain with a few rupees from a florist's shop. Perfumes fade with flowers. Perfumes fade with death. Why should I desire that which pleases the body only? Mr. Philosopher, you please my mind. Now, stretch forth your right hand. He made a gesture of blessing. I was a few feet away from Ganda Baba. No one else was near enough to contact my body. I extended my hand, which the yogi did not touch. What perfume do you want? Rose. Be it so. To my great surprise, the charming fragrance of rose was wafted strongly from the centre of my palm. I smilingly took a large white scentless flower from a nearby vase. Can this odourless blossom be permeated with jasmine? Be it so. A jasmine fragrance instantly shot from the petals. I thanked the wonder worker and seated myself by one of his students. He informed me that Ganda Baba, whose proper name was Vishuddhananda, had learned many astonishing yoga secrets from a master in Tibet. The Tibetan yogi, I was assured, had attained the age of over 1,000 years. His disciple, Ganda Baba, does not always perform his perfume feats in the simple verbal manner you have just witnessed. The student spoke with obvious pride in his master. His procedure differs widely, to accord with diversity in temperaments. He is marvellous. Many members of the Calcutta intelligentsia are among his followers. I inwardly resolved not to add myself to their number. A guru too literally marvellous was not to my liking. With polite thanks to Ganda Baba, I departed. Sauntering home, I reflected on the 3 varied encounters the day had brought forth. My sister Uma met me as I entered the door. "You are getting quite stylish, using perfumes." Without a word, I motioned her to smell my hand. "What an attractive rose fragrance! It is unusually strong." Thinking it was strongly unusual, I silently placed the astrally scented blossom under her nostrils. "Oh, I love jasmine." She seized the flower. A ludicrous bafflement passed over her face as she repeatedly sniffed the odour of jasmine from a type of flower she well knew to be scentless. Her reactions disarmed my suspicion that Ganda Baba might have induced in me an autosuggestive state whereby I alone could detect the fragrances. Later I heard from a friend, Alakananda, that the perfume saint had a power which I wish were possessed by the starving millions of the world. I was present with 100 other guests at Ganda Baba's home in Burdwan, Alakananda told me. It was a gala occasion. Because the yogi was reputed to have the power of extracting objects out of thin air, I laughingly requested him to materialize some out-of-season tangerines. Immediately, the luchis that had been served on all the banana leaf plates became puffed up. Each of the bread envelopes proved to contain a peeled tangerine. I bit into my own with some trepidation, but found it delicious. Years later, I understood by inner realization how Ganda Baba accomplished his materializations. The method, alas, is beyond the reach of the world's hungry hordes. The different sensory stimuli to which man reacts, tactual, visual, gustatory, auditory, and olfactory, are produced by vibratory variations in electrons and protons. The vibrations in turn are regulated by prana, life-trons, subtle life forces or finer than atomic energies, intelligently charged with the 5 distinctive sensory idea substances. Ganda Baba, attuning himself with the pranic force by certain yoga practices, was able to guide the life-trons to rearrange their vibratory structure and to objectify the desired result. His perfume, fruit, and other miracles were actual materializations of mundane vibrations, and were not inner sensations hypnotically produced. Hypnotism has been used by physicians in minor operations as a sort of psychical chloroform for persons who might be endangered by an anesthetic, but a hypnotic state is harmful to those often subjected to it. A negative psychological effect ensues that in time deranges the brain cells. Hypnotism is trespass into the territory of another's consciousness. Its temporary phenomena have nothing in common with the miracles performed by men of divine realization. Awake in God, true saints effect changes in this dream world by means of a will harmoniously attuned to the creative cosmic dreamer. Wonder workings, such as those shown by the perfume saint, are spectacular but spiritually useless. Having little purpose beyond entertainment, they are digressions from a serious search for God. Ostentatious display of unusual powers is decried by masters. The Persian mystic Abu Said once laughed at certain fakirs, Muslim ascetics, who were proud of their miraculous powers over water, air, and space. A frog is also at home in the water, Abu Said pointed out in gentle scorn. The crow and the vulture easily fly in the air. The devil is simultaneously present in the east and in the west. A true man is he who dwells in righteousness among his fellow men, who may buy and sell, yet is never for a single instant forgetful of God. On another occasion, the great Persian teacher gave his views on the religious life thus: to lay aside what you have in your head, selfish desires and ambitions, to bestow freely what you have in your hand, and never to flinch from the blows of adversity. Neither the impartial sage at Kaligat temple nor the Tibetan-trained yogi had satisfied my yearnings for a guru. My heart needed no tutor for its recognitions, and cried a spontaneous bravo, the more resoundingly because it was unoften summoned from silence. When I finally met my master, by sublimity of example alone he taught me the measure of a true man. Chapter 6. The Tiger Swami. I have discovered the Tiger Swami's address. Let us visit him tomorrow. This welcome suggestion came from Chandi, one of my high school friends. I was eager to meet the saint who, in his pre-monastic life, had caught and fought tigers with his naked hands. A boyish enthusiasm over such remarkable feats was strong within me. The next day dawned wintry cold, but Chandi and I sallied forth gaily. After much vain hunting in Bhawanipur, outside Calcutta, we arrived at the right house. The door held 2 iron rings, which I sounded piercingly. Notwithstanding the clamour, a servant approached with a leisurely gait. His ironical smile implied that noisy visitors were powerless to disturb the calmness of a saint's home. Feeling the silent rebuke, my companion and I were thankful to be invited into the parlour. Our long wait there beset us with misgivings. India's unwritten law for the truth-seeker is patience. A master may purposely make a test of one's eagerness to meet him. This psychological ruse is freely employed in the West by doctors and dentists. Finally, summoned by the servant, Chandi and I entered a sleeping apartment. The famous Sohong Swami was seated on his bed. The sight of his tremendous body affected us strangely. With bulging eyes, we stood speechless. We'd never before seen such a chest, or such football-like biceps. On an immense neck, the Swami's fierce yet calm face was adorned with flowing locks, beard and moustache. A hint of dove-like and tiger-like qualities shone in his dark eyes. He was unclothed, save for a tiger skin about his muscular waist. Finding our voices, my friend and I greeted the monk, expressing our admiration for his prowess in the extraordinary feline arena. "Will you not tell us, please, how it is possible to subdue with bare fists the most ferocious of jungle beasts, the Royal Bengals?" "My sons, it is nothing to me to fight tigers. I could do it today, if necessary." He gave a childlike laugh. "You look upon tigers as tigers. I know them as pussycats." "Swamiji, I think I could impress my subconsciousness with the thought that the tigers are pussycats, but could I make tigers believe it?" "Of course, strength is also necessary. One may not expect victory from a baby who imagines a tiger to be a house cat. Powerful hands are my sufficient weapon." He asked us to follow him to the patio, where he struck the edge of a wall. A brick crashed to the floor. The sky peered boldly through the gape, the lost tooth space in the wall. I staggered in astonishment. He who can remove a mortared brick from a solid wall with one blow, I thought, must surely be able to displace the teeth of tigers. "A number of men have physical power such as mine, but still lack in cool confidence. Those who are bodily but not mentally stalwart may find themselves fainting at the mere sight of a wild beast bounding freely in the jungle. The tiger, in its natural ferocity and habitat, is vastly different from the opium-fed circus animal. Many a man with Herculean strength has nonetheless been terrorized into abject helplessness before the onslaught of a Royal Bengal. Thus the tiger has converted the man in his own mind to a state as fearful as the pussycats." It is possible for a man owning a fairly strong body and an immensely strong determination to turn the tables on the tiger and force it to a conviction of pussycat defenselessness. How often have I done just that? I was quite willing to believe that the Titan before me was able to perform the tiger-pussycat metamorphosis. He seemed to be in a didactic mood. Chandy and I listened respectfully. Mind is the wielder of muscles. The force of a hammer blow depends on the energy applied. The power, expressed by a man's bodily instrument, depends on his aggressive will and courage. The body is literally manufactured and sustained by mind. Through pressure of instincts from past lives, strengths or weaknesses percolate gradually into human consciousness. They express as habits, which in turn manifest as a desirable or an undesirable body. Outward frailty has a mental origin. In a vicious circle, the habit-bound body thwarts the mind. If the master allows himself to be commanded by a servant, the latter becomes autocratic. The mind is similarly enslaved by submitting to bodily dictation. At our entreaty, the impressive Swami consented to tell us something of his own life. My earliest ambition was to fight tigers. My will was mighty, but my body was feeble. An ejaculation of surprise broke from me. It appeared incredible that this man now, with Atlantean shoulders fit to bear, could ever have known weakness. It was by indomitable persistency in thoughts of health and strength that I overcame my handicap. I have every reason to extol the compelling mental vigour which I found to be the real subduer of Royal Bengals. Do you think, revered Swami, that I could ever fight tigers? This was the first time and the last that the bizarre ambition ever visited my mind. Yes, he was smiling, but there are many kinds of tigers. Some roam in jungles of human desires. No spiritual benefit accrues by knocking beasts unconscious. Rather be victor over the inner prowlers. May we hear, sir, how you changed from a tamer of wild tigers to a tamer of wild passions? The Tiger Swami fell into silence. Remoteness came into his gaze, summoning visions of bygone years. I discerned his slight mental struggle to decide whether to grant my request. Finally he smiled in acquiescence. When my fame reached a zenith, it brought the intoxication of pride. I decided not only to fight tigers, but to display them in various tricks. My ambition was to force savage beasts to behave like domesticated ones. I began to perform my feats publicly, with gratifying success. One evening my father entered my room, in pensive mood. Son, I have words of warning. I would save you from coming ills, produced by the grinding wheels of cause and effect. Are you a fatalist, father? Should superstition be allowed to discolour the powerful waters of my activities? I am no fatalist, son, but I believe in the just law of retribution, as taught in the Holy Scriptures. There is resentment against you in the jungle family. Sometime it may act to your cost. Father, you astonish me. You well know what tigers are, beautiful but merciless. Who knows, my blows may inject some slight sanity of consideration into their thick heads. I am headmaster in a forest finishing school to teach them gentler manners. Please, father, think of me as tiger tamer and never as tiger killer. How could my good actions bring ill upon me? I beg you not to impose any command that I change my way of life. Chandy and I were all attention, understanding the past dilemma. In India, a child does not lightly disobey his parents' wishes. The Tiger Swami went on. In stoic silence, father listened to my explanation. He followed it with a disclosure which he uttered gravely. Son, you compel me to relate an ominous prediction from the lips of a saint. He approached me yesterday as I sat on the veranda in my daily meditation. Dear friend, I come with a message for your belligerent son. Let him cease his savage activities. Otherwise, his next tiger encounter shall result in his severe wounds, followed by 6 months of deathly sickness. He shall then forsake his former ways and become a monk. This tale did not impress me. I considered that father had been the credulous victim of a deluded fanatic. The Tiger Swami made this confession with an impatient gesture, as though at some stupidity. Grimly silent for a long time, he seemed oblivious of our presence. When he took up the dangling thread of his narrative, it was suddenly, with subdued voice. Not long after father's warning, I visited the capital city of Cooch Behar. The picturesque territory was new to me, and I expected a restful change. As usual, everywhere, a curious crowd followed me on the streets. I would catch bits of whispered comment. This is the man who fights wild tigers. Has he legs or tree trunks? Look at his face. He must be an incarnation of the king of tigers himself. You know how village urchins function like final editions of a newspaper. With what speed do the even later speech bulletins of the women circulate from house to house? Within a few hours, the whole city was in a state of excitement over my presence. I was relaxing quietly in the evening when I heard the hoofbeats of galloping horses. They stopped in front of my dwelling place. In came a number of tall, turbaned policemen. I was taken aback. All things are possible unto these creatures of human law, I thought. I wonder if they are going to take me to task about matters utterly unknown to me. But the officers bowed with unwonted courtesy. Honoured sir, we are sent to welcome you on behalf of the Prince of Cooch Behar. He is pleased to invite you to his palace tomorrow morning. I speculated a while on the prospect. For some obscure reason, I felt a sharp regret at this interruption in my quiet trip, but the suppliant manner of the policeman moved me. I agreed to go. I was bewildered the next day to be obsequiously escorted from my door into a magnificent coach drawn by 4 horses. A servant held an ornate umbrella to protect me from the scorching sunlight. I enjoyed the pleasant ride through the city and its woodland outskirts. The royal scion himself was at the palace door to welcome me. He proffered his own gold-brocaded seat, smilingly placing himself in a chair of simpler design. All this politeness is certainly going to cost me something, I thought in mounting astonishment. The prince's motive emerged after a few casual remarks. My city is filled with the rumor that you can fight wild tigers with nothing more than your naked hands. Is it a fact? It is, quite true. I can scarcely believe it. You are a Calcutta Bengali, nurtured on the white rice of city folk. Be frank, please. Have you not been fighting only spineless, opium-fed animals? His voice was loud and sarcastic, his speech tinged with provincial accent. I vouchsafed no reply to his insulting question. I challenge you to fight my newly caught tiger, Raja Begum. If you can successfully resist him, bind him with a chain, and depart his cage in a conscious state, you shall have this royal Bengal. Several thousand rupees and many other gifts shall also be bestowed. If you refuse to meet him in combat, I shall blazon your name throughout the state as an impostor. His insolent words struck me like a volley of bullets. I shot an angry acceptance. Half risen from the chair in his excitement, the prince sank back with a sadistic smile. I was reminded of the Roman emperors who delight in setting Christians in bestial arenas. He said, the match will be set for a week hence. I regret that I cannot give you permission to view the tiger in advance. Whether the prince feared I might seek to hypnotize the beast or secretly feed him opium, I know not. I left the palace, noting with amusement that the royal umbrella and panoplied coach were now missing. The following week, I methodically prepared my mind and body for the coming ordeal. Through my servant, I learned of fantastic tales. The saint's direful prediction to my father had somehow got abroad, enlarging as it ran. Many simple villagers believed that an evil spirit, cursed by the gods, had reincarnated as a tiger, which took various demonic forms at night, but remained a striped animal during the day. This demon tiger was supposed to be the one sent to humble me. Another imaginative version was that animal prayers to Tiger Heaven had achieved a response in the shape of Raja Begum. He was to be the instrument to punish me, the audacious biped so insulting to the entire tiger species. A furless, fangless man daring to challenge a claw-armed, sturdy-limbed tiger. The force of concentrated venom of all humiliated tigers, the villagers declared, had gathered momentum sufficient to operate hidden laws and bring about the fall of the proud tiger tamer. My servant further appraised me that the prince was in his element as manager of the bout between man and beast. He had supervised the erection of a storm-proof pavilion designed to accommodate thousands. Its center held Raja Begum in an enormous iron cage surrounded by an outer safety room. The captive emitted a ceaseless series of blood-curdling roars. He was fed sparingly to kindle a wrathful appetite. Perhaps the prince expected me to be the meal of reward. Crowds from the city and suburbs bought tickets eagerly in response to the beat of drums announcing the unique contest. The day of battle saw hundreds turned away for lack of seats. Many men broke through the tent openings or crowded any space below the galleries. As the Tiger Swami story approached a climax, my excitement mounted with it. Chandi was also raptly mute. Amidst piercing sound explosions from Raja Begum and the hubbub of the terrified crowd, I quietly made my appearance. Scantily clad around the waist, I was otherwise unprotected by clothing. I opened the bolt on the door of the safety room and calmly locked it behind me. The tiger sensed blood. Leaping with a thunderous crash on the bars, he sent forth a ferocious welcome. The audience was hushed with a pitiful fear. I seemed a meek lamb before the raging beast. In a trice I was within the cage, but as I slammed the door, Raja Begum was headlong upon me. My right hand was desperately torn. Human blood, the greatest treat a tiger can know, fell in appalling streams. The prophecy of the saint seemed about to be fulfilled. I rallied instantly from the shock of the first serious injury I had ever received. Banishing the sight of my gory fingers by thrusting them beneath my waistcloth, I swung my left arm in a bone-cracking blow. The beast reeled back, swirled around the rear of the cage, and sprang forward convulsively. My famous fistic punishment rained on his head. But Raja Begum's taste of blood had acted like the maddening first sip of wine to a dipsomaniac long deprived. Punctuated by deafening roars, the brute's assaults grew in fury. My inadequate defense of only one hand left me vulnerable before claws and fangs, but I dealt out dazing retribution. Mutually ensanguined, we struggled as to the death. The cage was pandemonium, as blood splashed in all directions, and blasts of pain and lethal lust came from the bestial throat. "Shoot him! Kill the tiger!" Shrieks arose from the audience. So fast did man and beast move that a guard's bullet went amiss. I mustered all my will force, bellowed fiercely, and landed a final concussive blow. The tiger collapsed and lay quietly. "Like a pussycat," I interjected. The Swami laughed in hearty appreciation, then continued the engrossing tale. Raja Begum was vanquished at last. His royal pride was further humbled. With my lacerated hands, I audaciously forced open his jaws. For a dramatic moment, I held my head within the yawning death trap. I looked around for a chain. Pulling one from a pile on the floor, I bound the tiger by his neck to the cage bars. In triumph, I moved toward the door. But that fiend incarnate Raja Begum had stamina worthy of his supposed demoniac origin. With an incredible lunge, he snapped the chain and leapt on my back. My shoulder fast in his jaws, I fell violently. But in a trice, I had him pinned beneath me. Under merciless blows, the treacherous animal sank into semi-consciousness. This time I secured him more carefully. Slowly I left the cage. I found myself in a new uproar, this time one of delight. The crowd's cheer broke as though from a single gigantic throat. Disastrously mauled, I had yet fulfilled the 3 conditions of the fight: stunning the tiger, binding him with a chain, and leaving him without requiring assistance for myself. In addition, I had so drastically injured and frightened the aggressive beast that he had been content to overlook the opportune prize of my head in his mouth. After my wounds had been treated, I was honoured and garlanded. Many gold pieces were showered at my feet. The whole city entered a holiday period. Endless discussions were heard on all sides about my victory over one of the largest and most savage tigers ever seen. Raja Begum was presented to me as promised, but I felt no elation. A spiritual change had entered my heart. It seemed that, with my final exit from the cage, I had also closed the door on my worldly ambitions. A woeful period followed. For 6 months I lay near death from blood poisoning. As soon as I was well enough to leave Kuch Bihar, I returned to my native town. I know now that my teacher is the holy man who gave the wise warning. I humbly made this confession to my father. Oh, if only I could find him. My longing was sincere, for one day the saint arrived, unheralded. Enough of tiger taming, he spoke with calm assurance. Come with me. I will teach you to subdue the beasts of ignorance roaming in jungles of the human mind. You are used to an audience. Let it be a galaxy of angels, entertained by your thrilling mastery of yoga. I was initiated into the spiritual path by my saintly guru. He opened my soul doors, rusty and resistant with long disuse. Hand in hand, we soon set out for my training in the Himalayas. Chandy and I bowed at the Swami's feet, grateful for his outline of a cyclonic life. My friend and I felt amply repaid for the long probationary wait in the cold parlour. Chapter 7. The Levitating Saint. I saw a yogi remain in the air several feet above the ground last night at a group meeting. My friend, Upendra Mohan Chowdhury, spoke impressively. I gave him an enthusiastic smile. Perhaps I can guess his name. Was it Baudry Mahashai of Upper Circular Road? Upendra nodded, a little crestfallen not to be a news-bearer. My inquisitiveness about saints was well known to my friends. They delighted in setting me on a fresh track. The yogi lives so close to my home that I often visit him. My words brought keen interest to Upendra's face, and I made further confidence. I have seen him in remarkable feats. He has expertly mastered the various pranayamas mentioned in the ancient eightfold yoga outlined by Patanjali. Once Baduri Mahashai performed the Bastrika pranayama before me with such amazing force that it seemed an actual storm had arisen in the room. Then he extinguished the thundering breath and remained motionless in a high state of superconsciousness. The aura of peace after the storm was vivid beyond forgetting. I have heard that the saint never leaves his home. Upendra's tone was a trifle incredulous. Indeed, it is true. He has lived indoors for the past 20 years. He slightly relaxes his self-imposed rule at the times of our holy festivals, when he goes as far as his front sidewalk. The beggars gather there because Saint Badri is known for his tender heart. How does he remain in the air, defying the law of gravitation? A yogi's body loses its grossness after use of certain pranayamas. Then it will levitate or hop about like a leaping frog. Even saints who do not practice a formal yoga have been known to levitate during a state of intense devotion to God. I would like to know more of this sage. Do you attend his evening meetings? Upendra's eyes were sparkling with curiosity. Yes, I go often. I am vastly entertained by the wit in his wisdom. Occasionally, my prolonged laughter mars the solemnity of his gatherings. The saint is not displeased, but his disciples look daggers. On my way home from school that afternoon, I passed Baduri Mahasya's cloister and decided on a visit. The yogi was inaccessible to the general public. A lone disciple, occupying the ground floor, guarded his master's privacy. The student was something of a martinet. He now inquired formally if I had an engagement. His guru put in an appearance just in time to save me from summary ejection. Let Mukunda come when he will. The sage's eyes twinkled. My rule of seclusion is not for my own comfort, but for that of others. Worldly people do not like the candour that shatters their delusions. Saints are not only rare but disconcerting. Even in scripture, they are often found embarrassing. I followed Baduri Mahasaya to his austere quarters on the top floor, from which he seldom stirred. Masters often ignore the panorama of the world's ado, out of focus till centred in the ages. The contemporaries of a sage are not only those of the narrow present. Maharishi, you are the first yogi I have known who always stays indoors. God plants his saints, sometimes in unexpected soil, lest we think we may reduce him to a rule. The sage locked his vibrant body in the lotus posture. In his 70s, he displayed no unpleasing signs of age or sedentary life. Stalwart and straight, he was ideal in every respect. His face was that of a rishi, as described in the ancient texts. Noble-headed, abundantly bearded, he always sat firmly upright, his quiet eyes fixed on omnipresence. The saint and I entered the meditative state. After an hour, his gentle voice roused me. You go often into the silence, but have you developed anubhava, actual perception of God? He was reminding me to love God more than meditation. Do not mistake the technique for the goal. He offered me some mangoes. With the good-humoured wit that I found so delightful in his grave nature, he remarked, people in general are more fond of jala yoga, union with food, than of dhyana yoga, union with God. His yogic pun affected me uproariously. What a laugh you have! An affectionate gleam came into his gaze. His own face was always serious, yet subtly touched with an ecstatic smile. His large lotus eyes held a hidden divine laughter. Those letters come from far-off America. The sage indicated several thick envelopes on a table. I correspond with a few societies there whose members are interested in yoga. They are discovering India anew, with a better sense of direction than Columbus. I am glad to help them. A knowledge of yoga, like the daylight, is free to all who will receive it. What rishis perceive as essential for human salvation need not be diluted for the West. Alike in soul, though diverse in outer experience, neither West nor East will flourish if some form of disciplinary yoga be not practiced. The saint held me with his tranquil eyes. I did not realize that his speech was a veiled prophetic guidance. It is only now, as I write these words, that I understand the full meaning in the casual intimations he often gave me that someday I would carry India's teachings to America. Maharishi, I wish you would write a book on yoga for the benefit of the world. I am training disciples. They and their line of students will serve as living volumes, proof against the natural disintegrations of time and the unnatural interpretations of the critics. I remained alone with the yogi until his disciples arrived in the evening. Baduri Mahasya began one of his inimitable discourses. Like a peaceful flood, he swept away the mental debris of his listeners, floating them Godward. His striking parables were expressed in a flawless Bengali. This evening, Badari expounded various philosophical points connected with the life of Mirabai, a medieval Rajputani princess who had abandoned her court life to seek the company of saints. One great sannyasi, Sanatana Goswami, refused to receive her because she was a woman. Her reply brought him humbly to her feet. "Tell the master," she had said, "that I did not know there was any male in the universe save God. Are we all not females before him?" A scriptural conception of the Lord as the only positive creative principle, his creation being naught but a passive maya. Mirabai composed many ecstatic songs, which are still treasured in India. I translate one of them here. If by bathing daily God could be realized, sooner would I be a whale in the deep. If by eating roots and fruits he could be known, gladly would I choose the form of a goat. If the counting of rosaries uncovered him, I would say my prayers on mammoth beads. If bowing before stone images unveiled him, a flinty mountain I would humbly worship. If by drinking milk the Lord could be imbibed, many calves and children would know him. If abandoning one's wife could summon God, would not thousands be eunuchs? Mirabai knows that to find the Divine One, the only indispensable is love. Several students put rupees in Badari's slippers which lay by his side as he sat in yoga posture. This respectful offering, customary in India, indicates that the disciple places his material goods at the Guru's feet. Grateful friends are only the Lord in disguise, looking after his own. Master, you are wonderful. A student, taking his leave, gazed ardently at the patriarchal sage. You have renounced riches and comforts to seek God and teach us wisdom. It was well known that Badri Mahashaya had forsaken great family wealth in his early childhood, when single-mindedly he had entered the yogic path. You are reversing the case. The saint's face held a mild rebuke. I have left a few paltry rupees, a few petty pleasures, for a cosmic empire of endless bliss. How then have I denied myself anything? I know the joy of sharing the treasure. Is that a sacrifice? The short-sighted, worldly folk are verily the real renunciants. They relinquish an unparalleled divine possession for a poor handful of earthly toys. I chuckled over this paradoxical view of renunciation, one that puts the cap of Croesus on any saintly beggar, whilst transforming all proud millionaires into unconscious martyrs. The divine order arranges our future more wisely than any insurance company. The Master's concluding words were the realized creed of his faith. The world is full of uneasy believers in an outward security. Their bitter thoughts are like scars on their foreheads. The one who gave us air and milk from our first breath knows how to provide day by day for his devotees. I continued my after-school pilgrimages to the saint's door. With silent zeal he aided me to attain Anubhava. One day he moved to Ram Mohan Roy Road, away from the neighbourhood of my home. His loving disciples had built him a new hermitage, known as Nagendra Math. Although it throws me ahead of my story by a number of years, I will recount here the last words given to me by Baduri Mahashaya. Shortly before I embarked for the West, I sought him out and humbly knelt for his farewell blessing. Son, go to America. Take the dignity of hoary India for your shield. Victory is written on your brow. The noble, distant people will well receive you.